Oh yeah, we'll start with you, with Rosanna and Daniel. We see from the film that this probably started off as a piece that you were writing for the LA Times. It was this cover story. How did you go from that to making a documentary? I mean, it doesn't seem like just an illustrated version of your article. It seemed like you were doing more additional reporting. Can you talk about a little bit like the relationship between the story and this documentary?
Yeah, thank you. Oh my goodness. So Professor David Valentine at UC Santa Barbara called me with that tip a couple of years ago. And, after that, the first, that haunting image of the barrel, prompted all of these questions, which led to kind of this history, going back through the history of DDT. And that's when I realized that Eunha and Lihini had also been discovering, really shocking amounts of DDT in dolphin blubber and sea lion blubber off the coast of California. And then just kind of realizing that this history of this chemical had continued to be a story even though we had collectively moved on from it. And so I published that first article. It, prompted, truly remarkable reactions from Congress and, the entire marine science community mobilized around it. I've been truly blown away by just how collaborative the research process has been, and to see kind of the generational handing of the baton from scientist to scientist to scientist. And part of kind of the immense reaction, it was truly one of the most viral stories that the LA Times had ever published, was also just the immense amount of interest from filmmakers to turn the article into a movie. And I was like, no thank you, because I'm a newspaper reporter, and I also was really nervous about what it would mean to make a movie out of such a complicated story of science. And also, it's a messy story without an ending, and it's also a story that didn't need to be sensationalized. So I was uncertain about what that would look like. So, the LA Times, incredible team of folks in the newsroom helped me kind of vet through some of those queries, and we went through more than a dozen. And ultimately, it took Daniel, my fellow director, and his immensely talented brother and cinematographer, Austin Straub, ambushing me at a book talk to convince me that, hey, and their ask wasn't, can we make a movie? It was, can we follow you in the field? And that's truly just how it began. I don't know if you want to build on that, but Daniel is also so immensely talented.
Yeah, we were fans. So Austin had read Rosanna's article when it came out in the paper, and we were working on a different project at the time. We were like, oh man, that would be a really cool project to work on. We were interested in these environmental stories, and this one was just so visual and gripping and had so many plot twists and interesting sort of through lines to follow. And so after we wrapped up the projects we were working on, we came and ambushed you at a book talk, and basically we were just like, hey, we're big fans of your reporting. We think this is a really fascinating story. We're documentarians. Can we just follow you? And we really didn't know sort of what the container would be or what the format would be. And once we got the okay to kind of follow you in the field for a day, it really started to become clear to us that this wasn't just going to be this retrospective where we sit you down in a chair and you talk about this whole thing in the past tense, but that we could follow you as you went to the labs with these incredible people and the other folks in the film as you're uncovering this information in real time. The data is still being processed, the conclusions are still being reached. We're seeing the rigor of the science and how much work goes into it. And that was something we were really excited about. And also we had an incredibly gifted environmental storyteller who was willing to be as involved in this as she could be. And so it just was a really natural decision to be like, okay, you shouldn't just be a journalist that we're adapting a film with, that you should be directing this alongside of me. And yeah, it was a really great process.
I will say I really didn't want to be on camera, and the first 3 versions of the film did not have me on camera, but Austin and Daniel just continued filming and knew the language of the film before it. But I really wanted to honor kind of the amazing work that Dr. Ho and Dr. Aluwihare have been doing, and as a newspaper reporter, I really didn't see myself as part of the story, so it really took kind of, and it was interesting for me to kind of expand and think about what the audience needed to tell the story. So it's been a really wonderful process.
Yeah, I mean, could you talk a little bit more about how do you, because the film is inherently about something that we can't see, and yet you talked about how it's like you thought it was a visual story, right? How did you make what is unseeable cinematic? If you could talk more about that. Both of you, actually, if you have both things to say.
Yeah, again, shout out to Austin. He is an incredible cinematographer, and I'm lucky enough to
He's
have
back
met
there.
him my whole life. He's standing back there. Hello. Yeah, I think like obviously the visual of the barrel was incredibly gripping at the beginning of the story, but also like the work that's going on in these labs is also there's a lot of visually interesting stuff that like a lot of people never get to see. A lot of documentarians would never be allowed in these environments, but because Rosanna has been working with these folks for quite some time, they trusted us enough to come in there and observe the process. And what was really cool about the way Austin sort of maneuvers the camera in these environments is he has this theory that someone kind of injected him in a past experience working on a show of like the camera should be curious and sort of peering over the counter watching someone cook is sort of like your kid watching someone cook. You're learning these processes. You're following these things from a nice, low, close perspective, and it feels curious just in the way the camera moves. And I think, to get to see a McTophid get cut up in a lab and like processed and turned into this oil that can get sampled, like that kind of thing was something that we'd never been able to really see before. But there was these like visual elements of the thing if we were able to kind of get in those environments. And thank you guys for letting us. So.
I'll add two more thoughts. I think Austin has won numerous Emmys for his cinematography. He also edited the film and also was our archival researcher and producer. And I think having Austin and Daniel go back through so much archival footage and to realize we just had forgotten all this history. Like the archival footage of the DDT being sprayed everywhere were like how-to videos. Like they weren't, secret videos that Austin unearthed somewhere. It was just in the public domain, and we had just, again, collectively forgotten this history. And to see Austin and Daniel work from, the stories of the past, and then seeing Austin like lens the story in the present, and to see how much of the lessons that we had forgotten are still things that we still need to relearn today, and then seeing Austin piece everything together in the edit was really powerful. And I also just want to note, Austin and Daniel have an amazing track record of making invisible things more visible. And I will also say the thing I learned about the film is that it is part visual, but also sound is something that we really spent a lot of time in. I want to shout out Rachel, our music supervisor, who's also in the audience. I want to raise your hand higher, there she is. Our music soup is here with us. We had an incredible composer, an incredible sound team. And I mean, did you love the score and, the music direction and also the sound design? And I think when you think about the emotional journey of this film, like every scene was guided by the music and the sound and the lack of sound when Rachel and our composer chose to, run something dry. And I think all of that also plays into just the craft of how to tell a story and how to help people feel the story, even if you can't see it.
I'd love to hear Eunha and Lihini's perspectives on this, because I'm sure, you're academics, you're doing cutting edge work, you probably publish academic papers, but this is like a different way of communicating your work. And especially, honestly, I can't think of there are a few public policy imperatives that have more important than like science communication. How do we communicate to the world, like what the truth of the world we live in? So I'm curious, like your reaction to seeing your work presented on screen in documentary form, and then also like your thoughts on like what we need to do better to communicate science.
That's a great question. First of all, when I was contacted by Rosanna, several years ago already, and I'm not a person really like media interview or newspaper interview. I really don't like it. But Rosanna really changed my mind, actually. So the 2020 article, that special investigation report, completely changed my mind. And then the way that Rosanna and I had an interview, like about 2 hours, the very first time. And it really convinced me that I can do it, with the newspaper, reporters, and the person who really understands the problem really, really well. And then learning from the communication, I also learned from her, because I found this scientific evidence, but then, what's the perspective, from the general public? What does that mean, what I found, So it's really helped. And then the Rosanna contacts me, like, okay, we're gonna make a film. So we're gonna come to your lab and then, film. I really don't like it in front of the camera. So this is like really, really know, but Rosanna, I trust Rosanna. So okay, I'll try, because you made a great article. This is like a much more powerful than actually my academic paper, right? So when I published it, and all the people I thought it was the paper that we published together, Lihini and I thought it was so incredible.
So good.
It was so incredible, and I thought we're gonna be contacted by blah blah blah, but nothing happened. It was yeah. But it was published in a great journal, but it was published like in 2015 or 16. But then actually 5 years later, and then Rosanna kind of like walked it up, made the paper out there. So it was an incredible experience, And then I said, okay, we're gonna do the filming, and then it was very nice, it was very comfortable, my experience in front of camera, and Danielle and Austin came, and it was super natural, I was not anxious, I was not nervous, there's just Rosanna and I just talked, and then just going on. So. And then, months later, that they invited us to see the film first. I was completely blown away, So this is wow, this is another completely different format. The science can be communicated, and then really with a larger audience, and it's much more powerful. So the whole process really changed my mind, and then especially that young generation, that, they can engage themselves, with this kind of think about this DDT, 50, 60 years ago, it was banned already, all the chemical, whatever, but the story really resonate with so many people. So it really changed, this whole experience changed my mind, how to communicate the science. Yeah.
I don't have much to add to that, but Austin was saying how Austin and Daniel they were like, oh yeah, we'll just follow Rosanna around. And that's kind of what I thought they were doing. They're like, oh, we're coming to film. I was like, okay, I got a couple of meetings. I'll show up in the lab and put a lab coat on. And my students will be, in there. And so, when this actually turned into a movie, I was surprised. But it's exactly what Eunha said. Just, if I wouldn't have done it with someone else, just because, it is something we keep close to us because we're so invested in it. These are decades of work and training, and I think, we're nervous when people who don't necessarily speak the same language as we do try to make us show up in front of a camera. But I know it's just exactly as Eunha said, just the power of seeing it that way. And recognizing, we're, scientists who run their own labs, we think we're pretty good at everything. But I think, but we also know our limitations. And for me, for sure, communicating my science to the public is something that I'm still learning how to do. So I'm so grateful to see what this movie became, and also how it's being received throughout the nation, really, and all the work that they did. So thank you for that.
I'm stealing the mic just to say that Lihini and Eunha are actually fantastic communicators of science, and I gravitated towards them immediately. And also, you are looking at two of the most renowned scientists in the world. They've both testified before Congress and have such a powerful and passionate way of communicating their science. And I also think the thing that Austin, Daniel, and I really connected with is just seeing how you run your labs and your students and your researchers and project scientists. And I also say with Bryce and Cal Coffey and everyone, that we have talked to, like the community of marine researchers and ecotoxicologists and environmental health scientists, like this was a particularly good cohort of scientists to work with to bring to life on the film. And the way you all shared space and handed off each other's expertise and connected it together, it was just so beautiful to see. And I feel like that culture starts with the principal investigators and how they run their labs. And yeah, I will just say too, like we have the same experience. I never get to watch 300 people read my LA Times article. It's, and I think you never get to see someone read your science, right? And it's a really beautiful experience just being able to see. I think the thing that we really wanted to shine light on, and it only was possible because of the trust that you all and all the scientists in this room like gave us, is to show the process of science, right? Like usually you have to wait for a paper to come out in order to write an article about something, but the timelessness of this film is that it's a film about not necessarily the conclusions, but actually the questions that we didn't know we needed to start asking, and to be able to show everyone just how many people it takes to do science, and just how repetitive it can be, and how tedious it can be, but how important it is to do every single step with such precision and care. Like that was something we really wanted to bring to the big screen.
Yeah, how much time it takes. I mean, like EPA folks are talking about, like you're just doing the first step of understanding what's happening, let alone what we're gonna do about it. Like that's just how long it takes. And also like just to piggyback, like how important it is to not see just to see the process of science, but the process of journalism, to watch how long it takes for you to get a story, to like, you're not just done with the story, you're like, there's so much more to it, and I really appreciate that aspect of this film. Since I have you all up here, and since we're in San Diego, I mean, I know this is a film that's like about LA County, San Pedro, but I couldn't help but notice that there were maps on here, and it was like dump sites 1 and 2, but I was like, what's happening at 7, 8, 9 around San Diego that you never talk about? Can you please just tell us what's going on in those dump sites?
Yeah, I mean, this is a film that's about one chemical that got dumped off of one part of the coast and one circle on a map. But it's the tip of the iceberg to so much more. And I think the thing that's been really powerful to us, Austin and Daniel and I just got back from Missoula. We played this film in Cleveland last week, and Miami and DC. And people have connected in every single one of these screenings to the story, and also the parallel conversations and questions to other chemicals and to other, bodies of water in our relationship to the environment. And, we have, the California coast, the San Diego coast, the Los Angeles coast is so iconic, and we think of, it's beautiful and blah, 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 but it's also so heavily industrialized. San Diego has a very, interesting history with the military, and but I think our forgotten history with kind of just how industrialized so much, and during the heyday of chemical manufacturing, that was everywhere. So I think that ultimately this is a film that is just the tip of the iceberg to a larger conversation, and has been so meaningful to see that conversation ripple out in every community that we've been to so far.
Yeah, if I can just add real quick too. Yeah, like we wanted to show like the science part of this process, like. It starts with this question, and then there's so much work that goes into just getting one answer. And then you can't just get one answer, you have to get a set of answers so that you can present that as like robust science that's rigorous, and then get peer reviewed and put it in a paper. So like we wanted to avoid this like feeling of like you take a sample, you put a thing in a machine, it beeps and boops, and then you get your answer out, and then we're like, that's the answer. Like I think showing how long this takes, how many people it takes, not just for the science, but the journalism as well. Like this, you're talking to a lot of people, you're going through a lot of things. There's these long-term archives that have sample sets that date back 60, 70 years that you can go back into. And like in these situations, like science, these long-term archives seem like they're very expensive, and like that it takes a long time to get answers, and sometimes could be labeled as inefficient. But like when you need those answers, there's no other way to get them than by these processes. And so we wanted to show people like this is the work that goes into those answers that eventually lead to us being kept safe, the public being kept safe from all of these issues, and having a better understanding of the things that we've done that we now have to live with. So that was like a really important step for us. So yeah, there's a lot more science that needs to be done, and a lot more support that needs to come from the community to make sure it does get done. So. Yeah,
just shout out to that NOAA Scripps archive from Cal Coffee. Like, oh my God. Did you see all of those dots up and down the entire frickin' California coast? They've been sampling methodically like that for decades. And then when something like this article comes out, they're like, oh, we have new questions. Oh, we have so many samples to go back through. And a really incredible team of people to like institutional knowledge to do that. Like those are messages that have really landed really powerfully, and that's something that we want to also keep championing. And we did just play in DC for the first time as well. The president of the National Academy of Sciences was there. I don't get starstruck that easily. I got starstruck seeing her. And it was really cool to see that message resonate so powerfully in DC as well.
I mean, I also just want to add, it takes a lot of people, it takes this, but, I mean, the reason we were able to even put together the kind of study that was featured in this film was because we were able to get the funding to do that, and the scripts team was actually really instrumental, the UCSB team, the San Diego State team, and then basically the support we got from the late Senator Feinstein and also the congressman that really helped us get the money to really put this kind of comprehensive study together. And Eunha and our study started with, I had a grad student who had a year-long postdoc, funding from California Sea Grant. Our first funding for this came from NIH and NSF. It's a joint grant that's called Centers for Oceans and Human Health. We're now funded through NOAA, thanks to the Congressional Appropriation. Cal Coffee has been funded by NOAA in the state. So it takes all these different groups of funding agencies to come together around a common cause like this, and it takes decades of sample collection to do this. So I also want to make that point really clear. Without that kind of support, we can't fund our students, we can't do anything. So I want to make sure that we also appreciate everything that made this possible for us. It's not just us. And years of funding invested in Eunha and I to get to this point so we could actually do science as well. So yeah, I just want to say that.
I just want to add just a couple of things that on top of what Lihini said, that also we got the state funding from the California as a matching, to the congressional funding. We have here like a scientist, say California Sea Grant program, we have them here, and also we have a NOAA scientist here too. All this work is really, really collaborative work on incredibly, great scientists and governments and academics, So we have done it, and then it's truly blessing. It's sometimes it's like almost like a magical, like when we here in San Diego, we kind of meet all these people, and this, everybody was like jumped in, like they want to help, they want to work together. So for example, like we're talking about, all these samples that we archived, that's a really, really tedious work, and even archive and store them correctly, all kind of stuff. Without those samples, we can't really do it. Like we cannot go back to the, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. So I really, really want to emphasize the importance of that, the funding, that our government scientists, they were able to do it, for many, many years. And I want to emphasize that, yeah.
I'd love to open up to some questions from the audience. Anybody has any questions? Yeah, right here.
Yeah, I would like to ask, even though DDT has been banned in the United States for decades, a lot of to control against malaria. Are there any published studies? I know that it's been, like the World Health Organization has guidelines about that, but I don't know if there's any research being done about the impact, even though it's in small amounts, what impact it has on the environment in that region. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know, and actually, I was born in Sri Lanka, and we used DDT for a very long time. Long after it was banned here. And I remember there were a lot of birds in my that didn't exist anymore. And I do wonder now, thinking back and I haven't worked there either. So I mean, it's an important question, and I do think about the places where it's still being used and who's being exposed to that. So yeah, I don't have an answer for you, but I do think that's a question that we need to look at as well, in a lot of different places. Well, and also don't forget where it was first used, right? I mean, it was basically in the tropical jungles of Southeast Asia, and how much was used, and what are the implications of that? Is anybody looking trying to ask that question? Probably not, and it's something that I've thought about seeing this footage as well.
Just want to add a little bit that's a good question, but here's the thing, like a DDT, historically how much we used, and then we look at the dolphins data, of course, all the environmental, biota samples, coming from a lot of them from Europe and North America mostly, the Africa, South America, the certain South Asia, those days are very scarce, so it's very important to know what the pollutions are actually over there. But at the same time, the DDT was used heavily in agriculture in the North America, in the US, which was actually the problem. If DDT was only used for the mosquito control really efficient way and a really careful way, we wouldn't be in this situation. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, right here.
I had two. One is somewhat easy and one is maybe difficult. I'll ask the easy question first. What was the most difficult part of the process for each of you going through this experience? Because it's obviously a very heavy topic. Second, between the effect of condor birds and their effect on humans, just out of curiosity.
I can go with the hardest part. The hardest part was getting Rosanna to agree to be on screen, and I'm really glad that she eventually did. It's very effective.
Do you folks need the question repeated in the back? First question was hardest thing in the process of making the film, and then second question was on the correlation between the health of the condors and the health of humans. Okay. Everything about this movie was hard. I think the thing that was hardest for me was going into this thinking like, oh my God, I have so much time to go geek out on the science that got cut from my 1,500 word count, and then realizing that there are also word count equivalents to the film. So like the first version of this film was 3 hours, and then it was not as good as what you just saw for 1 hour and 34 minutes. And then the second version of the film was 2 hours and 5 minutes. And we were like, that's pretty good. How many feature-length documentaries over 2 hours made it into the mainstream? And the answer was 9. And we were like, can we be number 10? And the answer was no. So I think really kind of thinking about reining back my own science geek, even just like letting go of words like non-targeted analysis and the amazing work that Lihini and Eunha are doing. I really wanted to get a GC machine in, but like our executive producers were like, I don't know what spikes. Well, I'm looking at something on a screen, and they're like, no. So, that there were just some really, I think like learning how to translate the science in a way that's compelling and propulsive visually was, something that was a hard lesson for me, but ultimately I think where we landed was really great. Do you want to answer the condor health question, or? Yeah. Just elaborate on your condor research period.
Yeah. So we have been working on condors. We're still working on, as a part of the current project. So we'll find out more. But I think that the wildlife and the humans are very complicated, because the wildlife, as the film really pointed out really well, the sea lions and condors they're really like, they don't know what is going on, so they are just in the habitat, and they eat what they're supposed to eat. But the humans, for us, we are a lot of other factors, So whether this DDT is going to cause the same health problems, I would say definitely it will it caused the problems. You know, you saw the epidemiologist and the Berkeley professor, you know, they found a link, you know, and then there's actually the animal models and molecular levels, they found the link too, you know. So actually it's the DDT's endocrine disrupting, it's a known thing, and it's known to cause the breast cancer, you know, both epidemiologically and also molecular levels and based on animal studies, yeah. I don't know if my answer is kind of,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, as an environmental scientist, I really appreciated the way you guys show the science. That's something I rarely see in films, and I'm a big film watcher. So my question is one, actually for Rosanna.
I'm just going to give you that. I feel like people in the background.
I was going to say, thank you so much for showing the science in the film. I'm an environmental scientist. And I always, every time I watch films, I'm like, that's not how it really works. That's not how it really works. Why did they do it that way? But you also made it super exciting. Like, I used to work on sediment cores, and like, you made it so much more exciting than it really is. But my question actually, so I really appreciate that. I hope you guys make more films about science that way so people understand what you had just said, Daniel, about how it's so repetitive, but it's so important, and how much work a lot of the scientists, I'm sure in this room, spend decades saving those cores and samples. But my question actually is for Rosanna. I used to work at EPA Region 9 on water issues, and I was wondering if you were going to actually have interviews with EPA Region 9. I personally found their answer to be wanting, but I was curious, I'm sure you guys had to edit things out, like how did you feel EPA Region 9 responded to your questions? I remember reading your article when it came out too, and there was a bunch of discussion. I don't work there anymore, so I'm just curious how your conversation, your conversation with Region 9 at that point was. I felt like they were skirting the issue, even though I know there was a lot of buzz behind. So just curious about any insight.
Thank you. I will say that Austin and Daniel are incredibly talented, and that's why they even made mud look fascinating and really exciting. I'm really grateful that the EPA team agreed to go on camera. Like, I think that also spoke to the trust, but also to like their commitment. You know, we had Mark Gold at the end, you know, he was at Heal the Bay and now at NRDC, and also just been on this, and was, you know, at the state also in between, and has been so committed to, he's the guy that was like, I started on this issue when I was 25 and now I'm 60, and that's pretty disturbing. And it's also very Mark.
Wearing the same shirt.
And he was literally wearing the same shirt, I feel like. Mark would laugh too if he was in this room. But, you know, like John Lyons at the EPA had also been working on this issue for his entire career, and I think that, I mean, my approach as a reporter is usually to try to find connectivity, and rather than vilify people or do the gotcha interview, like, I think kind of really allowing people the room to speak and to be a part of the process. And I think and I also think the EPA technical team has been so collaborative and really dedicated to kind of the questions, and I think with the way we filmed, we were very conscious of the fact that it's like they agreed to speak with us and to share their insights. And I would say that was the one place where we kind of did just let the quotes run. You know, like I think that, and John is very eloquent, so it was like pretty, like there was not a lot of editing, because we felt like we just needed to give the EPA the space to say what they needed to say and to allow what they're saying to be presented to the audience. Yeah.
I'll just throw in too on the entertainment kind of side of things. Like one of the things that we realized really early on is that a lot of people who are in the younger generation maybe haven't been exposed to the history of DDT as much as some of the people that maybe read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in school or were alive when DDT was being sprayed. And so we decided really early on that we needed this sort of montage to get people up to speed on it. And I just want to shout out Rachel again for finding like the perfect song that just sort of captured the spirit of that era and also had some great lyrical plays in there. But that moment of like kind of catching people up on it was one of the first things that we kind of put together. It was as Austin and I were kind of going through the historical footage and getting a grasp on this issue ourselves as well. And I think that was something that like, it's still one of my favorite parts of the film. I smile every time I watch it because it's just insane. Like the footage in that is incredible. And I would say too on the EPA thing, like I thought one of the coolest things in that interview was when he talks about someone who had worked at the EPA for long enough to remember these like old aerial photos. Those also were just stunningly preserved, massive film plates that they could go and zoom in and like see like were there these massive quantity of barrels. And so I guess just like that institutional knowledge and like these people that have been at these agencies forever are so like helpful in moments like this as well. So yeah, and we're just really grateful to be able to talk to them as well. So yeah.
We have time for a few more questions. All the way in the back.
I'm gonna run them, Mike. Okay. Because I prefer to be the production assistant than the director.
This question, I think, can probably go to the scientists. I was just wondering, with this new landscape of policy and funding, what the future of this research will look like if we're already seeing the consequences of these cuts and policy changes happening today. Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, of course, that's on the forefront of our minds. And, you know, I think speaking to the EPA question too, right? I mean, as Rosanna says in the movie, you know, this was permitted dumping, right? And it wasn't until these regulatory agencies were in place that we actually had laws against that kind of thing. So I actually worry a lot about that aspect even because of course, I worry about science funding, you know, both from a very personal sense because we're grappling with, you know, how do we pay our grad students and laying our technicians off and things like that. But, you know, I think there is still a lot of knowledge, institutional knowledge, and we will keep doing what we can at the level that we're able to. But I do worry about the regulatory agencies too that are really based in the science that we've done because those impacts are very difficult to reverse as you see in this movie. So I think, you know, both of those things are of concern. I mean, you know, we have, I have to say just a huge shout out to Scripps. Our government relations team is really incredible and they've been working day and night essentially trying to reach out to our partners across both aisles, you know, trying to communicate, not to lobby, but to communicate the importance of just science generally and what it takes and why it's important to keep the funding there. But yeah, I mean, yes, we are certainly thinking about this and the impacts, but I do worry about the loss of regulatory agencies too.
One of the things that we found out fairly recently as we were kind of like thinking about this and how to talk about some of these things in the environment that we're in right now, DDT has lasted 14 presidential administrations now, and the EPA was created under Richard Nixon. And so kind of, it's one of those things that like I think once people are aware of an issue, it's really not like a partisan position on like, should we do something about this? So I think our hope is that people get aware of the issue and then care about it. So,
just want to add a couple of things that you know the academics and we are, you know, all the scientists in academia. Every day is extremely stressful, but in also the same time, in the scientists in the government sectors also, you know, they're actually in the front, you know, line, and they're actually observing what's happening and. It's really heartbreaking. All the things that we were able to establish and all this collaboration, all these technologies, all this institutional knowledge, we face that we completely lost. You know, we could lose completely. And then, as Lihini mentioned, that, you know, we live in a pretty protected, you know, society. You know, a lot of in our environment is protected, you know, because we have regulations, we have the policies. You know, the policies are made based on the scientific evidence. You know, without scientific evidence, we cannot make the policy. but there's some kind of like a misunderstanding about this, so that really makes really kind of feel difficult. There's other stuff that we could discuss, like, okay, the regulations make lives difficult. Regulations like the regulations themselves are not bad. How to implement the regulation, we can discuss about it, make it more efficient, make it more effective. But the regulations themselves, the policies themselves, are all made based on the scientific evidence. So we want more, better policies, So to do it, we need more science, I'm in the kind of like more like a regulatory sector area. The science really helps to make a better regulations and policy for protecting humans and environments, But I think it's this current situation that we may completely lose, the ground.
So for me, this begs the question of not just doing the research, not just making films like this, but how do we get the word out? How do we distribute stories like this? So just by way of like concluding, like what's next for this film? How do we continue to tell this story and get the word out?
We are pretty early in our film festival run, and I think, kind of the old school documentary approach for those who aren't in the film industry is to basically, get into film festivals, start to show, interest and demand and build an audience. And I will say that every single place we've been to, it's been sold out screenings and just people who really connect with the science and also the journalism. And I think, it's not necessarily the easiest sell. We're not the happiest of films, but it's an important film. And I think that it's been really meaningful to all of us to see just how much it's resonating beyond California as well. So I think our next film festival is the Berkshire Film Festival. And so if you know anyone in the Hudson Valley, Western Massachusetts, that's a fantastic film festival that we'll be going to next, the weekend after Memorial Day weekend. And I think, our goal is to build community around this. There is something really... Austin, Daniel, and I have been at every single festival screening so far. We plan to continue to do so as much as we can. Rachel has been with us on so many festival screenings as well. But I think nothing beats connecting with people again. And I think that's something we have lost a lot, not just during COVID, but just I think so much of the apathy and the disconnect and the anger comes from just not being able to see our commonality anymore. And I think there is something really powerful about that. So for the next couple of months, that's kind of what we're committed to, just bringing this conversation to any community that's willing to have it. And I've just been so grateful to all the people who have been willing. Daniel has designed also a beautiful website. Is it outofplainsight.com? The Instagram is also banging because of Daniel, who not only did the graphic design, the website, the film poster, which you'll see in the lobby, also all the motion graphics in the film. Daniel did all of that as well. But yeah, we'll be continuing to post updates on our website, share the trailer with folks, give us a good review on Letterboxd. What else? What am I forgetting? I'm not the film person here. So.
No, yeah, I think that's most of the kind of marketing spiel. I would say too, like, support local journalism. Like, film is having a very difficult time right now. Local journalism is also not doing great at the moment. So, like, support the work of journalists. If you're a filmmaker in the room and you're interested in documentary, reach out to journalists. You're leaving a massive, massive resource on the table by not reaching out to people who are devoting their lives to getting these stories out in front of the public, and support science as well. There's a page on our website. It's a Get Involved page. Yes. It has all of the folks in the film on there, and you can reach out to them, contact them, and learn more about the work they're doing. So,
I'm just gonna plug one more time. San Diego, in particular, the marine science research community here, like, holy cow! I just like, I do, yes, like all content, like. From Sea Grant to NOAA to Scripps to San Diego State, I am blown away every time I'm here just by how connected it is, how deep the research goes, and just how much ground you're breaking and how much you're pioneering and how much commitment and collaboration it takes. And I'm blown away by the culture of research here, especially in the marine science and environmental science community. So it's particularly special to be here. And just thank you, Brian, thank you to the festival for just giving us the space to finally have play it in San Diego. This is I guess it's our San Diego premiere. It's the first time we've ever played in San Diego. So thank you.
Well, let's continue to connect. We have a post-reception outside. We have some food, we have some drinks. We could chat with our heroes here on stage. And of course, many of you who are also instrumental in making all this possible. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and hope to see you on more screenings here at the Spring Showcase. Have a good night.